Hey, welcome back to the Mark Moses Show. And yes, we are always broadcasting live from the Anidjar and Levine Accident Attorney Studios. And to kick off the week, we're going to talk to this fine gentleman who does a great job covering the Miami Hurricanes, if you couldn't tell by his hat and shirt. For Locked On Canes, great friend of mine, Mr. Alex Donno. Alex, how you doing today?
Wouldn't it be wild if I actually cover the Seminoles or the Gators and I just happen to be wearing all this gear to troll everybody? But I'm doing great. Football's a few weeks away, Mark, so I couldn't be happier.
How many years now have you been covering the Miami Hurricanes then?
So I think '05 would have been my first year. So we're in I guess this would be my 21st season then. So more than half, I mean, I'm 40, so more than half my life. It's
It's
crazy.
unbelievable, dude.
Yeah.
So you've been there for a lot of pain, some, good times, some bad times. Let's start with this then. I had to do this segment on TV, and they were asking me the question, are the Hurricanes, are they underrated right now going into the season? Should they get more respect to win the conference? And I'm sorry to say this to you. They've never won the conference. So is that valid if I feel that way when we go into this 2025?
It's valid, and I think that's one of the reasons why Miami is slept on just a little bit. And in saying that, I agree with the conventional wisdom that Clemson should be the favorite to win the ACC. Like, I got no disagreement there. But when I talk about Miami getting slept on a little bit, I've got two reasons for saying that. Number one, I was at ACC Media Days a couple weeks ago, and there were like, I don't know, 180 of us or so that voted on all the media polls and including all ACC team. Literally half of the all ACC team is Clemson. They got 11 guys, which is like that's insane. Like if Clemson's really that much better than Miami and everyone else, because the next teams in line have two all ACC players, Miami and a few others. Clemson's got 11. So I don't know. I feel like there's a little bit of like a herd mentality that's like putting so much hype behind Clemson. Like we'll see if they're actually that dominant in the conference. And then another thing is I definitely I think Carson Beck is getting underrated a little bit, if not a lot. A year ago at this time, the guy was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Like everyone had him, number one on their preseason Heisman lists and, potentially number one overall draft pick. And, he had, I guess, a bit of a down year last year. The numbers were still really good. And Georgia had the 102nd rushing offense in the country. They were below average in pass protection. His receiving core led the nation in drops last year. So, like, I feel like he's getting blamed for a lot of things that weren't necessarily his fault. He's also coming off of injury. So, a lot of folks, like, they actually want to see Beck's arm before they fully believe that he's back. I mean, having been at the first couple of training camp practices for Miami, I'll tell you the arm looks fine, the recovery looks great. So I think he's getting underrated a little bit. So I feel like Miami's firmly like in second place in the ACC, if not a team that I think has enough talent to push Clemson and possibly win the conference.
Hell of an answer. I love it. Hell of an answer right there. Talking with Alex Donno, Locked On Canes. Okay, you said you were there in Charlotte. You got a chance to talk to Mario Cristobal. What was your impression of him as he's entering a big season for him as the head coach there at Miami?
He feels at least I think he feels, because he didn't come out and say this directly, but you read between the lines that this is the most talented overall roster that he's had at Miami in the 4 years he's been there. He still feels like the trajectory is going up. And listen, last year, Miami, of course, had the ultimate cheat code at quarterback in Cam Ward. And yet they still, despite winning 10 games, which is really good, they didn't get into the ACC championship game and they didn't get into the college football playoff. And those goals were like right there. When they had that 9-0 start, Miami should have been in both of those things, and they couldn't close down the stretch. They lost, 2 out of their final 3 regular season games to fall short of those goals. But Cristobal to me seems very confident that his roster from top to bottom. And as much as I like Carson Beck, I don't expect Carson to be superhuman the way that Cam Ward was last year. But I think the overall roster is better. I think Cristobal is extremely bullish on his offensive line, which is the unit that he's most associated with, being a former offensive line coach. I think he feels pretty good about his defense, which is one of the main takeaways, Mark, because, hey, the primary reason why Miami didn't make it to the ACC title game or the college football playoff it was really their defense that let them down throughout most of the season down the stretch. They've hired a new defensive coordinator, Corey Heatherman, who came over from Minnesota. Cristobal speaks very highly of him. He speaks highly of the way players are buying in and kind of learning the scheme and executing the new defense. And so I think he's confident that this is the overall roster that probably gives him the best chance out of, this will be the fourth year coaching Miami, 4 recruiting classes in. And I think Cristobal, my primary takeaway is he seems legitimately pleased with the roster they're going to be putting out there this year.
Okay, so the follow-up to that is this. You bring that up. New defensive coordinator, new quarterback, 4 or 5 brand new wide receivers. Is it still wait and see, give it a couple weeks, and get ready for Florida? Is that your optimism then when you look at the first month of the season?
Yeah, 1,000%. And in fact, that's another big reason why I would slightly favor Clemson to win the ACC. They've got more continuity than Miami and literally more continuity than anyone else in the country. Clemson returns the highest percentage of their production from last year. So, yeah, there's definitely some wait and see there because Miami is replacing all 4 of their top receivers from last year in terms of catches and yardage. They're replacing their top 2 tight ends from last season. It's definitely, I think there's an opportunity though, Mark, to have as good of a group as last year, or if not better. But again, you've just got to see it because there are certain receivers that have been standing out. CJ Daniels is a transfer from LSU, who's a 6-year guy who, even though he's a transfer, he's become like the elder statesman and the leader of the receiver room. He's been looking very good in practices so far. Miami's top returning receiver from last year. He was a true freshman last season, so he didn't play a whole lot. JoJo Trader, but he was productive when he played, and he has an opportunity to step up and potentially be the number 1 or number 2 receiver this year. Miami also has, they've got some experienced guys in the slot. They're replacing Xavier Restrepo in the slot, which is probably outside of Cam Ward, probably the toughest guy on this team to replace. So that'll be more by committee, I think. Tony Johnson, an experienced transfer from Cincinnati, has practiced pretty well so far. But the one who's really been turning heads, and I talking about this on my Monday episode today of Locked On Canes, is true freshman receiver Malachi Toney. This dude is he's one of those super young true freshman guys who's really shining so far. Kind of reminds me maybe of what Kevin Concepcion did as a true freshman a couple of years ago at NC State. He's since transferred to Texas A&M, but maybe Malachi Toney can have that type of a first-year impact. And there's a couple of tight ends that are looking really good. Elijah Lofton heading into his second year, and Alex Bowman, an experienced tight end who transferred over from Tulane. So I think they're again, this is going to be the theme of a lot of what I say, Mark. I think the talent is there, and these guys have been flashing in practice. But again, you're replacing 5 of your top 6 pass catchers from last year. You're replacing so much production that there definitely has to be a wait and see to actually sort of believe that these guys can produce the way I think they can.
Okay, but then you start with Notre Dame. Well, that's not an ideal scenario, for everything you just said.
Well, so I think the big emphasis, at least early on in that Notre Dame game, and this will be the emphasis on both sides, because something that Miami and Notre Dame have in common are probably 2 of the best offensive lines in the country. And, the Fighting Irish are going to be breaking in a new starting quarterback because they, moved on from Riley Leonard. It's either going to be Minchie or CJ Carr. We'll see which one of those guys wins the job. And they don't have the experience. So I think both teams are really going to try to rely heavily on the running game and kind of see what gives up front. But to your point, Notre Dame, they did lose some of their guys from last year, but their defensive secondary should be, again, one of the top in the nation. I have no doubt about that. Last year in the college football playoff, they didn't allow a single reception by a wide receiver against Penn State in the national semifinal. So that's going to be for Carson Beck to have his first game at Miami, for these receivers to have, their first game as Hurricanes or first started as Hurricanes. It's hard to draw up a tougher matchup. That's probably the toughest defense Miami's going to face all year, quite frankly. So it's not an ideal situation, but I think the identity, especially early on for the Hurricanes, is going to be win battles at the line of scrimmage, which is going to be tested against Notre Dame. So it would not surprise me if that kind of ends up being a low-scoring game with both teams just trying to beat up the other.
Let's end with this with Alex Donno, and I appreciate you coming on today with Locked On Canes. I know you're a busy man, so again, thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, the ACC. They had 2 teams make it last year. But now the playoff committee decided, the hell with who's the top 4 conference champions. They're just making it up as they go along. What does Miami need to do? Do they have to win the conference? Do they have to at least have 2 losses? What's the best case scenario for this football team to make the college football playoff then?
Yeah, I mean, of course, as you alluded to, the easiest way, I mean, I say the easiest, Miami's never won the ACC before, but winning the ACC would be the easiest way or the clearest path in. Because if you win the ACC, you're going to get in. Just like you mentioned, you're not guaranteed, a top 4 seed. But if you win the conference, you get an automatic bid. Are there scenarios where they can make it without winning the conference? Sure. SMU was able to do that last year. I just think if Miami were to, let's say, come in second place in the ACC to still make the college football playoff, I think they've got to at least split the tough non-conference games against Notre Dame and Florida. Like, you've got to win at least one of those 2, because I think Miami would probably have to have like a 10-2 regular season record, maybe 10-3 if they lose the ACC championship game. In that scenario, I could see Miami getting in. Now, if Miami loses to both Notre Dame and Florida, and then they lose a regular season conference game, and they lose to, let's say, Clemson in the ACC championship game, come in second place in the ACC, if you're 9 wins or worse, you probably won't make the top 12, because they're not going to give ACC teams the benefit of the doubt the way they'd probably let in, 3-loss SEC, potentially Big Ten teams. So I think that's got to be the path, right? If you win the ACC, easier said than done, you're in. If you come in second place in the ACC, you better, have a strong non-conference record and either sweep Florida and Notre Dame or win one of those 2. And I think they can get in that scenario.
Was last year a disappointment in hindsight then?
Yes. Yeah. I think it's something Miami fans agree on. I think you'd find very few Miami fans who would say, you know what, we really felt great about, because the last taste in your mouth was, obviously losing the bowl game. It is what they didn't want to be in the Pop-Tart Bowl anyway, but losing that Syracuse game, the final regular season game, which literally kept them out of the ACC championship game by losing that game. Tough way to end the year. 10 wins was a step in the right direction. Like, it showed progress, but when they were that close to making, significant postseason strides and they fell short of it because they blew a 21-0 lead against Syracuse, it was a disappointing season. Like, they set the bar high early in the year, but then they fell short of that bar late in the year. I believe they need to surpass that and get to the ACC championship this year to call it a success.
Well, I hope they do. Alex Donno, yes, Locked On Canes. Thanks for your help, buddy, and have a great day, all right?
Mark, my pleasure as always, man. Thank you for having me.